And welcome once again to Nell Model Railway. I'm John. In this video, I will go through how to apply static grass, creating a wildflower meadow, making brambles and bushes, and making various trees. Here you see a selection of the static grasses I use, various lengths, various tonal shades, and various companies. Firstly, may I apologise for all the wobbly camera work throughout this video. Here is the countryside section before the static grass is applied. As you can see, I use scatter of various tones and types, from purchase scatter from Woodland Scenics to dried soil from the garden, and also cement water mix, which is something different to give different tonal shades to the ground, which does show through after you use this static grass. You must also consider that there are going to be some areas where there is no grass. I don't use any of the marketed glues for applying my static grass, as I feel that 100% PVA, liberally added but allowed to go tacky, is sufficient and has worked fine for me and saves, again, a lot of money. So as you can see, I apply it liberally, and you should break up the area that you're going to apply static grass to into easily usable chunks. And as you can see, I use the fence line as my boundaries for doing the static grassing in this area. And here is the completed first layer of static grass across the countryside section, and you must allow 24 hours for it to dry before I feel it can be then hoovered. What you might notice is in some areas the grass is laying flat, and a lot of folk in their videos say you've got to brush it and comb it and do things like that to make it stand up on end. However, when you drive through the countryside and you see grass that has been weather beaten by rain, it hangs down the hill. It doesn't stand up vertically. It follows the flow of the water, which would be downhill. And here I am starting to layer the static grass. You can see that I'm using a proprietary brand, But once again, I have used hairspray, very cheap stuff, and that works just as well. I should point out that this area that I'm layering is the area that I did the initial test strips of static grass. So it has been dried for more than 24 hours. The wildflower meadow is, of course, a first layer of static grass followed by a second layer of farmer's field. And whilst the hairspray was still drying for that layer, I added white, yellow and red scatter, which was fine flowers, I can't remember where from, which produced the poppies, daisies, etc. You see here that I'm using brown polyfiber that was initially white polyfiber that I sprayed with a rattle can of brown, and I tease it out and lay it on the ground and keep teasing it until I'm happy with the shape and depth. I then, unlike others, don't remove the polyfiber because I feel the shape I've got then would be ruined by lifting it to then stick it. So I pour on a 50-50 mix of PVA and water and let that soak through it. And sometimes I let it dry before adding scatter. Other times I use the hairspray and add the scatter whilst the PVA is still wet. Both methods seem to work fine. In one of my previous videos, you saw how to make deciduous trees. So this is just a quick shoot through how I make my trees. First, I got some garden cuttings from a beech hedge that we have. I then attach seafoam branches and sprigs by drilling holes and then using various glues to stick those items onto the real wood, so to speak. Then once I'm happy with that, I rattle can it with brown, grey or green or a combination of those colours. And finally, once that's dry, the good old hairspray and scatter using different tones. For smaller but maturing trees, and to add some perspective, plus for smaller bush-like trees, for example, hawthorn, I select larger pieces of seafoam and use those on their own, and also some of the smaller bits that drop off the sea foam for things like hawthorn, which you'll see later. I again spray them sometimes with brown or green. Sometimes I leave them in their natural state because it depends what type of wood you're looking at or type of tree. I then use the old hairspray and scatter and get a decent enough finish. When placing trees, remember some of the very large mature trees, like the first two that I created, which are 70 to 80 feet in height, they sometimes stand alone as they've shaded the rest of the ground for other trees to grow. So you have some undergrowth and that's about it. But with smaller trees, they are planted in plantations and are fairly closely packed. So try and obtain a variation in your planting. In the next video, I'll be looking at how I'm going to structure the work site and whether I make a hut, and also whether I scratch build a signal box or buy a kit from Scale Scenes.